Hello and welcome to the 12th and final lesson from the book of Job as presented from the British Bible School during the period whilst we've been in lockdown due to the coronavirus. In this particular lesson, we arrive at the time when God finally speaks to Job. In verse 38 and the first few verses we read this. Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. He said, "Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me." Up until this time, Job had wanted to plead his case before God. We see in other speeches that he made where he actually demanded to see God and be able to talk to him. His main contention was, if only God were here, I could let him know that he's wrong in doing this to me. If only God were here, I could prove to him that I'm not the sinner he thinks it is that deserves this suffering. The funny thing is, his three friends who had come to comfort him, they also said, if only God were here. If God were here, he would tell you that we're right. He would tell you that you have some terrible sin that you're hiding from us, and this is the reason that you are suffering. They all said, if only God were here. Elihu, the fourth of the friends, claimed inspiration, and that's as though he was saying, God is here because I'm speaking on his behalf. All we know for sure is that all that could be said from human wisdom has been said. They've examined the case, they've asked questions, they've tried to answer them, and now, finally, it's God's turn to speak. We'll notice what God did not say in chapters 38 and 39. First of all, he said nothing about the problem as had been discussed. Obviously, the friends said that Job had sinned in a terrible way. That was why his suffering was so great. God said nothing about these discussions and the problem that was mentioned. There was nothing about the meaning of suffering aside from Job. There's nothing said there about why suffering comes upon people. There is nothing that was said about the discussion he had with Satan. He didn't say, now, Job, yeah, you're quite right. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. Here's the reason for it. And then tell him what we knew from chapter 1. There's nothing about Job's dream of life after death. God didn't say, I sent this dream to you to let you know there's something worth hanging on to. There was nothing mentioned about it. There was nothing about a mediator that Job cried out for, someone who could stand before God and plead his case for him. And there was nothing about a redeemer. Job said he knew that his redeemer lived, and he knew that after he was gone, his redeemer would plead his case for him and prove him innocent. God said nothing about a redeemer being available for him. There was nothing to unravel the mystery of Job's suffering at all in the things that God said. So God has some questions for Job, and he begins first of all in chapter 38 about the inanimate world. If you read through it, these are the questions that you will see appearing. Different people have tried to come up with a number of questions that God asks, and they appear anything between 70 and 80 depending on how you number the questions, because sometimes there's two things asked in one sentence. But around 70 or so questions are asked of Job concerning God's creation. What holds up the world? Well, we know that mankind has come up with all sorts of weird and wonderful ideas of what holds the world up. There are suggestions from a turtle swimming around with the earth on its back, to elephants standing one upon the other until the last one has the world on its own back. We have road atlases named after Atlas, the great man holding up the earth on his shoulders. What does hold up the world? Who decided how big the world would be? Have you ever stopped and thought, why is the earth the size it is? Is there a reason for it? If God could foresee the population explosion, could he not have made a bigger earth for us? Why does it have the dimensions that it does? Who determined where the sea shall stop and the land begin? Well, certainly not King Canute, the king who thought he could hold back the sea. I think he drowned trying, or nearly did. Can you cause the day to stop and the night to begin? Time and time again I've heard lately that we're coming up to the longest day. Well, who made the longest day and the shortest day? Who decided how long the light shall last and the darkness of night would be? Can you make thunder or lightning? Wouldn't it be great if you could decide when the storm would come? Only last night I watered the garden, watered the flowers and the vegetables. I'd no sooner put everything away and come back inside for a cup of tea when it poured it down with rain. If only I'd known. But we don't. We don't control that. Can you cause the wind to blow in any direction that you desire? Can you bring dew to the earth? Can you bring frost? Can you change the stars in the sky or rearrange the constellations? Do you know where the snow is kept or how much it is worth? It would be interesting really to ask people that don't believe in God, who want to try and prove from science that things came about from somewhere else, these questions. What would they answer to this? How would they determine these things where our inanimate world is concerned? God then goes on to ask some questions about the animal world. Do you understand how the animals of the wilderness regulate their lives? For a little while, because we've been at home and we have a bird feeder in the back, it's been nice to see the different birds coming in, and we've even seen some chicks and fledglings come in with the parents and eat food out of the garden. And now suddenly, for the past couple of days, the birds have disappeared. And Suzanne, my wife, says that it's because they're obviously on the nest. They go through two lots, raising two lots of children at this time of year. Why do they do it then? We have babies throughout the year, don't we? But why do the birds have theirs at a particular time? Maybe the food's more available. Maybe it's warmer for bringing a baby into the world. But who determines when that happens? It'll be interesting to see over the next few days if they reappear in the garden as the chicks become fledglings. Can you feed the lion and the raven? Do you know the mountain goat's breeding habits? Do you even want to know the mountain goat's breeding habits? Can you point out where the wild donkey lives? Did you dress the peacock with his beautiful feathers? Do you regulate the life of the ostrich and the stork? Do you give the war horse his great strength? Do the hawk and the eagle fly at your command? What wonderful questions about nature. I've been watching Spring Watching on the television and seeing how life exists on the earth that you don't really know is there because you don't stop to take note of it. And where do these things come from? Where do they go? Where do they live? Who regulates their lives? Moving on to the moral world, because that's the real question here, isn't it? God has told Job or asked Job these questions, and they're all about his creative powers, all about his wisdom in controlling life and even the inanimate world. But the question is one of morality, surely, that his friends have told him, you're suffering before you sin. Well, what does God say about that? Nothing, actually. Nothing of the moral world, which is the real cause of Job's problem, it would seem to us, and certainly seems to his friends. Not one word, even apart from Job, about the problem of suffering. Why do some people suffer and others don't? Why do the innocent suffer and those who are wicked not suffer? Well, we know that both do in equal measure at times. There is nothing said of retribution, that is, of punishment, being delivered through suffering. Nothing of discipline to stop us from doing things that are wrong. So no punishment for doing wrong, and nothing to warn us against doing wrong. There is nothing of suffering for righteousness' sake. There are lessons we can learn about this through the things that we've seen in what the friends have said to Job, but God himself is saying nothing about these things. The Lord does speak of his supernatural perfection revealed in his creation and in his providence. He's pointing out to Job that I'm the one who controls the world. And if I can control the sea and the day and the night and thunder and lightning and the donkey and the birds and the lions, then I can look after you. He indicates that he is exalted above all creatures, and as creator, he is not answerable to his creatures. He speaks of his great power and his infinite wisdom, wisdom that's needed with that power in order to use it correctly. So lessons that we learned so far in these questions that have been asked by God to Job, and in the things that haven't been stated, that as God is exalted far above the powers of nature in his might and power and wisdom, so he is also exalted above the moral world which he controls and rules. We also realize that the Creator is also the Redeemer. People ask the question, why did God create us if he knew we were going to do wrong? There's a more important question than that, because we are here. Creation has already happened. It's taken place. We can't undo what's been done. So we're here and we do sin. So the question is, why did he provide a Redeemer, even though he knew we were going to do what's wrong? It's because he loves us. He loves us so much, he allowed Jesus Christ, his Son, and our Saviour, to be our Saviour if we want him, our Redeemer, even though we don't deserve it. God does not have to give an account to any of his creatures. He is the Creator. And here in this book, God is not teaching Job natural history, but he is giving him an insight into the greatness of the Almighty. The Bible wasn't written as a science book, but nothing in science contradicts what's written in the Bible. This lets us know that this is a special book provided by God, who knows all things, and therefore it is to this book that we need to turn for our learning. Job is offered an opportunity to reply to God, and in chapter 40, first of all, before reading those couple of verses that are on the screen, the Lord said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. And so Job has this to say, behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer. Twice, but I will proceed no further. Job states that in view of God's greatness, he is insignificant. He isn't insignificant to God, and neither are we, but we are of small account. Who are we that God should be mindful of us, as the psalmist said? And Job is coming to this conclusion as well. Not that he is so insignificant, as he said previously, that God shouldn't be bothered about some sin that he commits, but that in relation to God's creative powers and being Lord over creation, Job is insignificant, is of small account. He has spoken against God previously and is not going to do it now. But what's missing? What's missing is an apology. He does not humble himself. He does not confess God's greatness. He doesn't confess his own sin. So it seems he's not changed yet, and he's not quite ready to change yet. So what does God say? He will go on to talk about what gets nearer to Job's true sin at this particular point. Continuing to read from verse 6 of chapter 40. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? That's how it's put in the New International Version. The ESV, English Standard Version, says, will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may be in the right? You know, this kind of idea, this kind of attitude comes about if you've ever had to argue with your teenage children who seem to know far much more than anyone who's older than they are. And sometimes, rather than argue, it's easier to say, okay, I'm wrong and you're right. And what we're really saying is, you're going to have to find out for yourself because you won't listen. And this to me seems to be the situation here. Job is so full of pride, he wants God to be wrong so he can be right. By insisting on his own righteousness, Job made accusations against the justice and the goodness of God. God had got it wrong, obviously. This idea, this theological idea that they had, that if you suffer, it must be because of some sin that you've committed. So he's having this arrogant attitude. He is full of pride because he wouldn't completely let go of his old theology. He couldn't see the truth. And when our theology is wrong, we get God wrong. If we misunderstand who God is, then we must understand his ways. So God says, you take my place then. You be God. To do this, Job has to dress himself with divine power, and he must be clothed with majesty and glory. Only then can he judge fairly, and he has to give fair judgment in every circumstance. He can punish the wicked. Well, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Get a group of people together, talk about a particular crime, and ask what everyone thinks the punishment should be, and you'll have as many different ideas as there are people in the room. Even in society, we struggle over this. Is prison a punishment? Or is prison a way for people to learn? Do people come out of prison determined not to do that again? Or do they come out of prison hardened to the fact that they want to do something worse to get something back out of society for what's happened to them? What is the correct punishment for the correct crime for the personality of the one who committed it? What's going to have the right result? Which punishment will get the desired response? Job's going to have to decide that if he wants to be God. He can destroy the godless. Well, he has to determine who the godless are, and he can humble the proud. This might be a little bit of a warning to Job. It's his pride that's his problem. Now he's got to humble the proud. How will he do that? Would he do it by causing them to suffer, to bring them down a peg or two? He has to judge without respecting persons. But first of all, he's got to judge himself. Anybody else who's prepared a Bible lesson or talk, very often you'll get caught up in an idea that you're going to speak on, and you read a few verses and you recognize, actually, this is describing something bad about me. This is something that I need to deal with in my life. God's word penetrates into our heart and judges us before we can even teach other people. Job is going to have to do this if he's God. He is also called upon to test his power on two animals to see if he really is powerful, the behemoth and the leviathan. Some suggest that these are mythical creatures, the behemoth and leviathan, but God's point is about his position as creator over the created. So it would follow that he would actually talk about something he had created and had control over. Now, maybe it doesn't matter if we consider that it's a mythical creature. An illustration is being used of whatever is the strongest animal on land and the strongest animal in the sea. They could be dinosaurs that are now extinct, or animals that are still alive. One suggestion by a number of commentators is the hippopotamus for the land animal. The point is, what's the largest animal in land and in sea? And let him who made him bring forth his sword. In other words, in verse 19, who can win in hand-to-hand combat with these animals? Can you do that, Job? Can you bring them in submission yourself? Are you like God? So finally, Job will repent. In chapter 42 and the first 6 verses, he's now in a place where he understands. And he says to God, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Then it seems he speaks to himself as he considers the words of God in verse 3. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you make it known to me, is what God said. Job says, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. In this repentant attitude, Job acknowledges God's wise power. If you're going to have that kind of power, you've got to use it wisely. God's plans are never thwarted. So here's Job telling him you got it wrong. But no, God cannot get it wrong. Job confesses his own foolishness. He repeats the question to himself, I shall ask and you shall instruct me. Now he actually wants that. He wants to be instructed by God. He desires to be led deeper into God's knowledge and wisdom. And he rejoices in a deeper knowledge of God. Now he not only hears, but he sees. He was the one that gave instruction to other people, and he pointed it out in his speeches. But now he's not just heard about God, he has seen it. And it's the same for us. What we see on the written page, what we read in the Bible, sometimes we don't get as much of a grasp of it until these things are brought about in actuality in our lives, and we have to face them in a real, living, active way. Job humbles himself in dust and ashes. He doesn't come before God as a prince. He referred earlier to the times when young people would stand aside and let him walk through. That when he walked in the room, that even the elderly would stand because Job was there. And he was the one who was wise. He was the one who would instruct. He's the one that everyone came to for help and advice. But he doesn't come before God as a prince now, but as a pauper. He's the one who's in need, and he's the one who wants to learn. He's also no longer a judge, but he's willing to accept the judgment of God. So what about the solution of the problem of suffering? He's repented. Does he have that solution? Well, the question why is often a matter of pride, wanting to know why this has happened to me of all people. The question why is saying that I don't deserve this. I'm a good person. I'm too good a person for this. So why has this happened to me? So that's the voice of pride that's talking. And very often we do try and look at the reason why suffering has come upon us. And the question surely, or the answer should be, why not? These things happen. Why should they not happen to me? What is so good about me? What is so worthy about the person I am and the things that I've done that should exempt me from suffering what other people suffer? The soul that is humble shall say, I do not know why, but I do know God, and I know that he will make it right in the end. And as we have a physical demonstration of this in Job, spiritually, it's true for us. This life is temporary, and we're going on to something that is much, much better. It will be made right in the end. Even though we suffer now, even though we don't know the answer and the reason now, God will make it right in the end. Not in this life, but in the one that counts, the life to come. The innocent do suffer, not because of God's carelessness or an evil purpose, but it's actually a demonstration of his wisdom and his power. What's meant by that? Let me share this quote with you. Sometimes the best answers to life's most baffling and troubling questions lie not in what God says, but in who he is. When believers recognize that truth, they begin to see that God does not just know the answers, but in fact is the answer. To know him is to know all one needs to know. The rest may come later, but it is unnecessary for now. Do you know God? Do you really know God? If we do, then our suffering is something we can and should endure. There is no rhyme or reason to it necessarily that we understand, but these things come upon people anyway. Will you remain faithful to God through it because of who God is? Or are you going to ask for it to be taken away because of who you think you are? Let's trust in God and let us demonstrate our faith to him even at times of suffering. In fact, even in the good times, that's often when people forget God. We just need to glorify God all of the time. Job is restored in verses 7 to 16 of chapter 42. Instructions are given to the three friends to go to Job and offer sacrifice. And notice this, God says, Job will pray for you. I will hear him, but not you. So Job prays for his friends, and God restores his prosperity twofold. James, in speaking of Job in the New Testament, says this concerning the end of Job's journey, as it were, how the Lord is full of pity and mercy. This is what's being demonstrated in the restoration of Job, that God is full of pity and of mercy. Notice from this quote, Satan and Job's wife, who are prominent in the prologue as agents of evil, who try to get Job to curse God, are intentionally omitted in the epilogue. This deliberate omission emphasizes a major teaching of the book, namely that man's relationship to God is not a give and get bargain, nor a business contract of mutual benefit. Satan tried to explain to God that Job only served him for what he could get out of it. He's been well and truly defeated in that premise. Where is he now? Not even a mention at the end of it. You can just go away, Satan. You've served your purpose in proving that God is right anyway. And what about Job's wife? She's not mentioned. There's no mention of her. She told Job to curse God and die. It was great when he was giving you all the things that he seemed to be giving you. And now he's not there, so why should you serve him? So again, there's nothing mentioned of her. The conclusion of it all then is that Job is now ready to live, but not by his own integrity and his own righteousness, but by faith in the eternal purpose of God. No matter how good we think we are, no matter what a good Christian or a good church member or however you want to define it, no matter how good your works, your deeds, your things you say are, we still need God. And we need to live by faith in him and not by faith in our ability to do things, even in his name. The basic purpose of the book is to call on all people to accept by faith the purpose of God. What is that purpose? For some it will be to suffer. For some it will be to thrive in some way. How will you use what you've got? How will you behave when you suffer? In every circumstance we come across, we need to be glorifying God, whatever our lot might be. The appearance of Job's friends to counsel him led to controversy, disillusionment, and despair. But God appeared on the scene, and he led Job to submission, to faith, and courage. The lesson for us there is not to live by our own philosophies and our own wisdom, but to always turn to God's word. Am I speaking God's word when I talk to people about the things they're suffering and need to endure? The words of the men were unable to penetrate into the darkest recess of Job's mind, but the word of God brought abiding fruit. It is God's word that is our bread of life, that is a lamp to our feet. Let us always turn to it for everything that we need for life and godliness. God did not answer any of the burning questions that are debated in the book. He didn't need to. He just needed to let the people know who he was, and we serve him for who he is, not for what we can get out of him. Because in the end, Job answered the need of Job's heart, and that need was to stop depending on himself and his own righteousness, but to have faith in God. He didn't explain each phase of the battle to Job. He didn't describe what had happened so that Job could understand, but he made Job more than a conqueror in it. And he does the same for us. We are more than conquerors, even though we don't understand the battle. This book, the book of Job, takes its place in the testimony of the ages, in the annals of history, that there is a blank space in the human heart that only Jesus can fill. Jesus answers all the questions that Job asked. He is our mediator. He is our Redeemer. And no matter what, everybody needs him, whether you suffer or whether you don't. The only way in which we can be saved is by accepting the wonderful grace and sacrifice of our blessed Redeemer, Jesus